How's everybody doing? Thanks for joining us again. My name is Paul Goyette, and welcome back to Goyette Ruano Thompson. And this afternoon, I have with me my good friend, Mark Peacock. Mark, thanks for joining.
Sure.
Today.
Happy to be here.
Mark is our personal injury of counsel, very, very close friend of mine. Mark and I have worked together for many, many years, probably 25 years at this point at least. And so what we're going to talk about today, to start with, is Mark's expertise and specialty is personal injury. He does all the personal injury work related to our office and far beyond that. In fact, has handled probably every size and shape of personal injury case over his many years of practice in this area. But I want to kind of start in the beginning, and because we get these calls all the time and from our various client bases where we'll get a call of someone who thinks they have a personal injury case. Sometimes they don't know what they have. They've been hurt. Auto accident cases are easy. But they've been injured somewhere, somehow. Maybe the injury occurred a long time ago. Maybe it's very, very recent. But what I really wanted to drill down on today for a few minutes, Mark, from your position of expertise, what do you look for when a client calls? What are the kinds of things you look for as to whether they have a viable personal injury case that's worth pursuing on your behalf?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So it varies, but generally what you're looking at there are two things. You're looking at liability, and then you're looking at damages. I look at the damages first. Okay, so it's my experience that if you have a high damage environment, sometimes you can get around the liability issues that are created. So the liability means who's responsible.
Who's at fault?
Who's at fault? And I can give you an example real quick.
Yeah,
if you want.
please.
So real quick, I represent primarily public safety. So if a police officer, just to use this as an example, is rolling code, that means sirens, lights going through an intersection, he or she has a responsibility to stop and go through that intersection in a reasonable, safe manner. And that includes making sure that everybody at the intersection stops and obeys the lights and sirens. Sounds good enough. But you'll notice, actually, what happens a lot of the times is one person is not paying attention. They don't hear the siren, they don't see the lights, and they go into the intersection, and then boom, they get into a vehicle accident. So that in those cases, the officer is typically found to be at fault for the accident.
Really?
Yes, almost 100 times out of 100 times.
Really?
Yes. So what typically happens is the officer at that point gets concerned. They get concerned, are they going to get investigated? Are they, what's going to happen? If they're found at fault, are they going to get sued? The department going to get sued? Whoever it is, if it's a county, their employer, if they're going to get sued. So they usually pull back and get almost nervous about it. That's the liability part. That's a good example of something I personally don't care about, because I know the bigger picture is, okay, what was he doing? He or she's responding to a call. To, it could be anything from saving a kid drowning in a pool to a stabbing to a shooting or whatever it is. They have their lights and sirens blasting, so they're in an emergency, right? So when they're injured in that environment, I'm focusing on the injury, because I know that if I get that case, and it's a bad injury, let's say there's a broken bone or something like that, the other driver's going. I'm pretty goddamn sure I can get that other driver to pay up their policy on those cases. And regardless of what the liability environment is, even if it's 100% my guy, we just have a case down in San Jose that happened to an officer, exact case, and everybody was saying, you're ridiculous to take that case. Like, no, it's an easy hit for the officer, because the officer's injuries are like this. The offending driver's policy limits are like that, and you can use the value of the damage to overcome the policy. A lot of those cases you don't even have to file, but I oftentimes do, simply because I need to talk to the adjuster to educate the adjuster on the dynamic of a police officer going through an intersection.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, what you're telling me in the example that you just gave, even if the police officer who's going code 3 through the intersection is found to be at fault but sustains a serious injury, that's still a case you would take a hard look at.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
The case I'm telling you about down in San Jose, that officer was not only found at fault, but that officer went through an internal investigation to determine whether or not he violated any policies and procedures. And they found out, they determined that, yeah, he did. He violated some policies and procedures. So you have, in the civil arena, he's at fault. You have it in administrative, internal arena,
course.
he's at fault.
Sure.
So most attorneys would say, I don't want anything to do with that. This guy's at fault for the accident, regardless of what the injuries are. They don't even get that far. What you want to do is you want to take a look at the injuries initially, because they can be quite high. If an officer is off work or off duty for a while, the value of their case could go skyrocket rather quickly.
Well, let me ask you, when you say you want to evaluate damages, what constitutes damages? What makes up the damages you look at?
Okay, that's a very good question. It's a little bit of an art form, or art. It just is. So basically, we've all learned this in law school. Damages can mean a great many things: economic damages, physical damages, emotional distress damages. End of marriage, things like all kinds of different things. Generally speaking, especially when it's public safety personnel, they're going to have to go through the workers' comp system for care and treatment.
If it's on an on-duty accident.
That's right, if it's on duty. If it's not on duty, this analysis still applies primarily. So you're looking to see, number one is, you look for things like surgery. Was it surgery? Was there bleeding? Was there broken bones? Was there a hospital visit? Was there a hospital stay? Because when you start looking at it like that, you realize, especially nowadays, the value of these cases just start going up and up and up and up.
Because medical bills are so high?
Yes, it's out of control. So you have these healthcare systems, they bill, but what they get actually paid for is a different number. So the bills are huge. A bill could be, for one night in an ER could be $20,000, depending on what they did. So if it's that high, you know that the insurance company is going to pay a portion of that, and that officer is going to be off work for a certain amount of time, and you realize that the damage is going to be, like I just described, the damage is like $50,000. That's like the hard damage of that case. You go, I can probably get $100,000 on this, or I can get $200,000 on this, depending.
And I would assume if your client, the police officer in this case, has like any permanent, long-term or permanent injuries, that would just increase the damage.
Oh yeah. So, especially nowadays, what you need to do is when you get that call coming in and that officer is injured in that environment, you sign that officer up as quickly as you possibly can. You open conversation up with his or her workers' compensation attorney for reasons we can get into in a second, and then you file the lawsuit. You don't screw around. You file the lawsuit. Okay, you file the lawsuit as fast as you possibly can. You get it into the system. The reason you do that is because, number one, the officer they're still going to be dealing with their injuries. So their damages are increasing.
So they're going to still be getting treatment and recovering.
Getting treatment, exactly. Okay. Just starting to get treatment.
Okay, I'm with you.
And once that's going on, the value of the case is beginning to rise, right? And then so you're looking at the other driver. And if it's just a two-vehicle accident, you're looking at the other driver, and you want to know, does that driver have assets? And part of the initial asset that you're looking at is insurance. So how much insurance does that driver have? So you do, you do things you probably aren't supposed to do. You make an analysis of that person and assumptions on that person. Do they own the home? Especially nowadays, you can get on the internet and find everything out on people you want.
Of course, yeah.
You find out they have assets, they have insurance, who's their insurance. And if it's a certain insurance, you can make reasonable assumptions that they're going to have higher limits than somebody who doesn't have that insurance. So you begin to weigh and balance the amount of the damage versus like what the insurance is. I don't care about the liability at that point. You file it, and guess what? You get a phone call from the other side, and they want to know, why did you file so fast? And you go, well, I filed so fast because your client injured my client. And what you want to do is get the money in as quickly as you possibly can.
Time value of money.
Exactly. And it also helps the officer out, because if the other driver had $100,000, give this officer $100,000, but he or she's continuing to treat in workers' comp, it's better for them to get the money up front faster rather than through the comp system.
I've noticed that in working together that, unlike all the other personal injury lawyers we've interacted with over the years, you like to file that lawsuit straight away.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think lawyers who don't do that, are especially now, are making a grave mistake. I know we have a 2-year statute to file and things, but it's a grave mistake. It's a grave mistake. When you file a lawsuit, the court system in California, as you know, they have fast track programs, and they like to give you a trial date within 9 months to 9 to 12 months. So that creates a backstop on the back of that case.
Creates a deadline.
Exactly. And so what do people do with deadlines? They get stuff done. Yeah. So they start analyzing it, and they see the damages, and I'm just dumping records and bills and everything on the other side. Yeah, my guy's not even working. He's off duty. Do you have any idea what that means? You start throwing things at him like 40 or 50 times, stuff like that. And then a lot of times they'll pitch the policy, or you find out that they have higher incredible limits. Then you're off. Then you're really off to the races.
Or they personally have a lot of assets, which
sometimes
happens.
That happens a lot nowadays, especially the economy over the last 3, 4, or 5 years has done. Especially a homeowner, it's pretty steady. And a lot of these homes have a lot of equity in them and things, and those are reachable, and people will write a check.
I can, from my own personal observation, watching Mark in action, I have seen Mark file complaints virtually immediately upon us collectively getting the case, and has that strategy, I can tell you, works, because I have seen defense attorneys and insurance companies settle these cases out at the earliest possible stages that I ever thought would be possible, and turns cases that I initially look at, and I'm not a personal injury specialist at all, although I've been around it my whole career, have turned cases into money that I didn't think there was any money there. So I can tell you, Mark's system works.
Yep.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for this series with Mark Peacock. Mark, as I mentioned at the start, long-term friend of mine, long-term associate. He's the of counsel personal injury lawyer for Goyette, Ruano Thompson, is an expert in this field and has gotten unbelievable results. So, Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Very informative and helpful as usual.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And ladies and gentlemen, I want to encourage you to be your own advocate. You hear this in the medical field a lot when you're looking for your medical care, but it's equally true in the legal arena. When you need a lawyer, when you're looking for a lawyer, ask questions, push for answers, ask questions of different lawyers, whether it's your workers' compensation lawyer or any other lawyer you might be working with. Ask those difficult questions, be your own advocate, and think outside the box. Don't follow necessarily the formula that everyone out there in the industry has followed for the last 40 years, because it's probably outdated and probably no longer effective. If you like what we're offering here, please tell your friends about it. Please subscribe. We look forward to seeing you again. Thanks very much.
Thanks.